So here we go. We're just going to continue talking about the moon today. Last time, if you remember, we did the moon phases. We will be referring to our moon phases a little bit throughout the stuff we're going to talk about today, but it's not directly related to that. So, how many of you guys have ever seen the moon? Have you ever seen the full moon before? Have you seen the full moon? I'm asking this question because most of you are probably going to say yes, right? You probably have seen the full moon. And we're going to talk about how the full moon looks. I have had some people tell me they have never, ever seen the full moon, like ever. Like one guy told that to me, and I thought he was joking. But I looked in his eyes, and I can tell he was not joking at all. He has never, ever seen the full moon. Just how serious he looked at that time made me think, like, oh, dude's a serial killer. Never seen the full moon. That's got to be the only answer to that question. Like, you've all seen the full moon, right? So, does the full moon always look the same? No, it doesn't always look the same, right? Give me some ways in the Discord that the full moon can look different sometimes. Differences that you see sometimes. What can be different from one full moon to the next full moon sometimes? Anything that you can think of that could be different. Yep, so the size can look different. That's one. The size can look different. It could look bigger or smaller sometimes. We probably have all seen the moon looking really big, and sometimes small. The color also can change. Yes, the color can be different sometimes. Some colors you might see, I mean, like most of the time, it looks sort of a whitish, grayish color. But sometimes it'll look more yellow. Sometimes it'll look more orange or red. Ever heard of the blood moon? Sometimes the moon looks red. Somebody said it can look brighter or dimmer. That's usually an effect of the atmosphere. Maybe it's a little bit thicker with material. So let's talk about these things. They're different effects, okay? So let's talk about the size difference first, okay? Sometimes the moon looks bigger. We know that the moon doesn't actually change size, right? It's not actually getting bigger. So what could be making the moon look bigger sometimes? What could be the answer to that question? Why might the moon look bigger? It might be distance. Yeah, it might be the distance doing that. It might be closer sometimes and farther sometimes. And we know that that is true. We know that it definitely does come closer sometimes because its orbit is an ellipse. Every orbit is an ellipse, so the moon's not always the same distance away from us. So let's see if this makes sense, though. Think in your head, where does the moon look? Imagine the moon looking really, 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 really big. You're probably seeing it in a certain part of the sky, okay? Imagine the moon looking really, really, really big. You're probably imagining it near the horizon, okay? Like you're imagining it when it's rising or setting, okay? So it turns out that the moon always looks really big when it's rising and setting. And when it's straight over your head, imagine seeing it up there, it's probably always kind of small, right? So it's big over here and it's small over here. And that's true for everybody in the planet. So check this out. Let me draw a quick picture. Here's the Earth. Here's a person on the Earth, okay? So I'm saying that this person, when the moon is above their head, is going to see it looking really small, okay? And when it's rising, you're going to be looking to your side. So that means for this person, when the moon's over here, it looks big, okay? So if it's the distance doing that, then that means that the moon must be closer when it's over here and farther away when it's up here. Okay, that's fine. But I said that was true for everybody on the Earth. For everybody on the entire Earth, the moon is going to look small when it's above your head and big when it's rising or setting, okay? Let me restart this real quick. I had a little blip. But not everybody's living right here with us. There's somebody else standing right here, right? There's somebody else standing right there. And for this person, this moon is above their head, and so that one should look small. And over here, the moon might be setting for them, so that one should look big. So then, this person would disagree with us over when the moon looks big. So it turns out that when the moon looks really, 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 really big to us, to the human eye, it has nothing to do with the distance, okay? That's an optical illusion, okay? If the moon looks big when it's rising for everyone, but it's not rising for everyone, then that means it must be an optical illusion, okay? So the major difference in size that we see every day is an optical illusion happening in your head. Now, sometimes the moon does actually get a little bit closer, and will look a little bit bigger, and that's sometimes called a supermoon. But if you actually go out and look at a supermoon, if you don't make tiny little precise measurements, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between a supermoon and a regular moon. So that's a tiny little difference in size. But sometimes we see this big change in size. So what's going on in your head? It turns out that your brain is very, 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 very bad at telling how big things are. It's not something that human brains are good at, okay? So check this out. Here we go. Ready? Pa! Okay? Check that out. Did anybody think that my hand was 1,000,000 miles wide? Did any of you guys think it was even like 100 feet wide? Anybody think that? Probably not. You probably didn't, okay? You probably had a good idea of how big my hand was, right? So here's my question. How did you know immediately how big this hand was? Even if you have never seen my hand before. I mean, I know you guys have, but how did you know how big this hand was? How did you know? How does your brain know? Don't overthink it. Because you're used to seeing hands, right? You've got hands, right? You've got hands. Your hands, you can touch hands. You've had hands all your life, I assume. I guess I don't know you guys, but I assume you all have hands. I guess that's kind of ableist of me, but whatever. You've seen hands before. You probably touched a hand. So your brain knows how big hands are, okay? Let me give you guys another mystery object. Ha! Ha ha! Okay. Did any of you guys think that this was 100 feet wide? No. How did you know how big this thing was, even if you don't know what this thing is? How does your brain know that this is not 100 feet wide? Yeah, you compare it to the hand. The part of your brain that figures out how big things are, like anything I raise up, bleh, even if you didn't see exactly what it was, you know that this is not 100 feet wide because your brain sees the hand right there, and it knows how big a hand is, and so it can figure out that it's comparisons, right? Your brain figures out how big something is by comparing it to the things around it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and guess that none of you guys have ever been to the moon. So, does your brain know how big the moon is? No. Your brain does not know how big the moon is. So, that means that your brain has to figure out how big the moon is by comparing it to things. And that's a bit of a problem, because there's not really anything next to the moon most of the time, right? When is there something next to the moon, though? When it's rising, right? When it's rising, what are you going to see next to the moon? What kinds of stuff are you going to be able to see next to the moon when it's rising? What are you going to see? Like, picture it rising. What stuff's in your view right next to the moon? Trees, buildings, yeah, things like that. And here's the thing. I'm going to go ahead and assume that each one of you has probably been to a tree before. Like you've been to a tree, okay? And you've seen that tree. Probably had your hands on the tree at some point, right? And so your brain knows that trees are big, right? It's like, oh, tree big, right? Tree big. So the part of your brain is just, it's not very smart. It's just, brains aren't as good at stuff as you think they are. So tree big, right? And when it sees the moon next to the tree, the moon's gonna be bigger than that tree, right? So what it says is it's like, oh, your brain says, oh, tree big, so moon big, moon big. And when it decides that the moon is big, it gives you a feeling that the moon is big. It'll just whoop up in the sky. It's an optical illusion. It's not actually bigger. It just looks bigger. And here's the other thing. When the moon is straight over your head, what's next to it? What's next to the moon when it's straight over your head? Really? Nothing, right? Pretty much nothing. I mean, maybe stars, but your brain doesn't really know how big those are either. There's nothing next to the moon up there, so your brain just kind of gives up on figuring out how big it is, and it's like, moon small? Okay. And it just guesses that the moon must be small because it has nothing to compare it to. It's just, oh, it must be just a tiny little circle up there. And so your brain tricks you into thinking that the moon is smaller. But here's the thing. If you actually took a picture of it, if you took a picture of the moon up here when it was above your head and looking small, and a picture of the moon when it was rising and looking big, and you compared those two pictures together, you would find that they look exactly the same size in the photographs. So this is a total optical illusion caused by your brain just being stupid, right? What's the name of that illusion? It's called the moon illusion. Which is kind of a goofy name. Whoever named it was super boring. The moon, the big illusion with the moon is called the moon illusion. But here's the thing. The moon is not the only thing that does this, right? The moon is not the only thing that looks bigger when it's rising and smaller when it's over your head. What else does this? What else looks really big when it's rising and much smaller when it's over your head? So don't overthink it. I know you know this. The sun. Yeah, it's the sun. So I don't know why we call it the moon illusion when the sun does it too, but it's just called the moon illusion. Technically, anything that rises and sets does this. Even things like constellations will look bigger when they're rising than when they're over your head. So anything that rises and sets, the moon, the sun, everything does the moon illusion because your brain is stupid. Right? And I don't mean that against just you guys. My brain is stupid too. Everybody's brain is dumb, okay? It's just bad at size. Okay, so that's a size change, okay?